Good afternoon, everyone. How's everybody doing? Is that like postprandial slump? I need to energize here. Okay, so I'm Luca Foschini, co-founder, chief data scientist of a company called Evidation. We are based in the West Coast. We've been around for 10 years, 300 employees around, pretty much, and we do digital research of the kind that you've seen, all day, but more in an industry setting. And today I'll tell you a little bit about how we have built an infectious disease monitoring system at scale with learnings from what you heard from the folks that had talked before me. So yeah, let's dive into that. So hold on tight. This is not going to be a product demo, okay? I just need this to set context to go into the geeky stuff later. But if you do want to join this, take a picture to that QR code. So this is a flu monitoring program that we launched a week ago. Around 90,000 people have joined already. When we launched it, now we're at 150,000. It's a program to educate around influenza-like illness. And I'll show you a little bit more about that in a second. I'll show you a screenshot to show what the experience looked like. So why would you join this program, and how do you join this program? Well, first of all, you need to have a thing called the My Evidation app. It's an app used by around 5 million people. You can download it from the App Store or Android Store. It's a health reward app. That's really important. It's a health reward app. It's not a research app. You download it and you install it because you want to learn more about your health. You want to connect your Fitbit, get more active, sleep better, learn about healthy food. And as you are part of that experience, then you get offered the possibility to join research studies or programs like this one. So why would you join FluSmart? Well, because you can earn points. The whole experience is gamified. The whole My Evidation is gamified. It's a consumer-facing app, once again. It's a thing that people like to use or should like to use. You should join it because you want to stay up to date to flu rates near you, get tips from CDC, receive community insights, and if eligible, participate into specific research, which will be the core of this talk. It will be the geeky part of this talk. How do we get people to participate in that research? It is not a medical device. It is not a way to find when you have the flu and cure you, and it shouldn't be, right? Like that kind of stuff is regulated. This is not a regulated device. It's the result of a lot of science, as we've seen today, but also a lot of engineering. And this will be the main part of my talk today. I will hammer over and over again that I think we need to bring more of an engineering perspective into health data science. We brought a lot of perspective over the years. That's great. I think we need a little bit more of engineering one. And I'll try to convince you of this in the next 20 minutes. So why engineering? How did we get from 90,000 folks enrolled in this study to 150,000 in just 5 days? Well, because we have a platform with 5 million people already on it that are already doing healthy things, that are already engaged with their health, then whenever a program like that is offered to them, they want to jump on it, right? So, but in order to maintain and develop this platform over the years, that's a gargantuan engineering effort, right? It doesn't come for free. It comes with large engineering team and lots of VC money that we been lucky to have received. So this is the last slide that I'm gonna have about Evidation. Again, you need to understand context a little bit on how this is even happening. So there's 5 million people in the real world using this app on one side, and on the other side of the platform that were built, there are enterprises. It could be biopharma, biotech, academics, people like you, people that want to do research on participants in the real world, collect data that we call PGHD, person-generated health data. It could come from wearables, it could come from self-report, it could come from smartphone, it could come from your medical record that you authorize to me as a researcher. And we connect these two. That's our business, okay? FluSmart is one of these programs that is run by Evidation specifically. We are our own client in that case. So there is a lot of engineering. There's also a lot of science that goes into this, right? Like you build something around flu, you need to have domain expert in-house. You need to have understood how flu and wearable and smartphone and real life all play together. So we spent, the better part of this decade, the last 5 years, in publishing around flu and digital and infectious disease in digital. When COVID came up, that publishing became a lot bigger and also included COVID. Full story, QR code, same idea. And so two key findings here really that have helped us inspire and design Flu Smart are these two. On the left-hand side, let me see if I can use this. Yeah. On the left-hand side, research that we done a couple of years ago, we tried to measure the burden of flu at the population level, okay? Like, when people have the flu, if it's severe, they go to the doctor. And, the healthcare system can measure how bad that flu is. But there's a lot of people that don't go to the doctor. They have milder flu. They stay at home. So what is a way we can actually measure the loss of productivity, loss of mobility, loss of work? Okay. We try to use step counts for that. Step counts is a tricky measure because you might lose step counts for many reasons. So here we try to make a causal statement here, and the methods go in the paper to see that. But the TLDR, the outcome is that a lot more steps are lost due to mild flu that is never seen by our medical system, is never recorded by the healthcare system. It never goes into making policies. It's just invisible, right? A lot more than the hard flu, the one we measure. The second piece of interesting science that has inspired the design of Flu Smart is that when COVID came out, everybody was like, hey, my Fitbit can tell if I get COVID. And yes, it can. It can also tell if you get flu. And also they look remarkably similar, right? Like this thing doesn't see viruses. It just sees your ANS response. And so we saw that, your ANS response, your jumps in resting heart rate, they could be very similar between these two, which means that if you use them in real world, you probably need to start a conversation about confirmatory tests. You can't really make a diagnosis out of that, right? All right, so now the geeky part, application drill down. There's this program running out there. 150,000 people are using it. Every day they're getting tips about flu rates around them, CDC, what's supposed to do if you catch the flu, great. If you happen to be living within 30 miles of sites where there's ongoing trials that some of our pharmaceutical partners are running to develop a drug that's going to help with flu. Imagine an antiviral that you need to take within 12 hours or 24 hours of the symptom onset. You need to run a clinical trial for that kind of stuff, right? It's a drug. How do you recruit for such a clinical study? It's not an easy one, right? You need to catch people that have just developed flu symptoms, right? And you need to have them go to the site and do all the things. So you can't just recruit them with flyers at the hospital at the beginning of the year. Hey, whenever you have flu, remember, come back here. There's a study for you. That doesn't work, right? So the idea here was, can we use the findings that everybody's talked about this morning, to bring the flu possibility top of mind and help you, realize that there's this opportunity next to you where you can go and join this clinical study for developing, a drug that hopefully goes in the market and next year you can actually take. All right, so great. There is a lot of research out there. I hope you can't read this. This actually, the goal of this page is not to be read because the point is that there's so much research out there on how these measures, these devices can measure flu and COVID, detect flu and COVID, forecast flu and COVID, you name it. I was so glad I didn't have to put this together because fantastic Brianna Goodale and Mira Mitraza, sorry if I butchered the name, have done this meta review, at the May of this year. So lots of them use Fitbit. Lots of them have the algorithms go anywhere from binary classifier, logistic regression to deep neural networks. And if you look at the key metrics, lots of them use resting heart rate or some measure of it. Lots of the measures are AUC, sensitivity to specificity, okay? Why? Well, because you are thinking you're developing a diagnostic device. And so, diagnosis means AUC, it means the statistic. Also, you're in machine learning, you want to classify between cats and dogs, AUC, okay? Keep that thought in mind, it's gonna pay off. All right, so what does this thing look like? This pipeline looks like in production. It looks like this. By the way, this is me in March 2020. We have our own showcase of resting heart rate jumps. Giorgio had a very much more impressive one than this one. This is only 10 beat out of 40, but it's still pretty incredible. And you want to catch these kind of things, okay? So Every day, the pipeline wakes up, looks at all participants in the program, takes the last 28 of data, computes some features that are the ones used by the model. This is a feature model. I'll talk about deep models later. And then cast prediction, who's sick or not. And then check this out. This is very important detail. We take the top 3% score of the model across the population. And for those only, we send alerts to folks. Okay? Not for everyone. It's not a threshold based on some specific sensitivity. It's a threshold based on little few people. Why? Well, because we want to be very accurate first. And second, because we don't need to send too many people to sites, right? In fact, we actually need to regulate down that number. So you can trade precision for volume here, and we're doing that by that 3% rule. All right. So great. We got all the research out there, the models, the patents. We have patents on the models too. Great, fantastic. This is a done deal. Just deploy one of these machine learning things on people wearable devices. We developed that for Apple Watch, Garmin, and Fitbit across device agnostic. Fantastic. There's just one problem. When you deploy it, this is the AUC you see. It's not the 0.9 that you see in papers. It's this thing here. And everybody that has AUC in their mind, they will say, this sucks, don't use it, right? And so that's kind of like a bad realization. And we went down the rabbit hole to figure out why that is the case, because even our own data, we could reproduce the research that was published out there. So it's not a data problem, it's not a model problem. It turns out it's really a research design problem. Like a lot of the research out there maybe sells the idea of like real-time monitoring, but the way the analysis, the way the prediction is cast, the way the analysis is designed is that maybe sometimes you use data that you don't really have if you are in full real time, because you have data latency. For example, for minute level data, it doesn't come as fast in data level data. So if you do that analysis retrospectively, you will have the data to guess on today, but if you do it prospectively, you don't. Like you really have to do a true prospective real-time analysis to figure that out. And then there are other biases of, sometimes these AUCs are reported only around the day of onset, but if you cast prediction every day, you don't know what date of onset is. Sometimes AUC are reported across different times of the year, but hey, COVID, just like flu, varies a lot, so the models only learns when is more prevalent and doesn't learn to actually recognize it. So there's a bunch of bias here, and then we have a commentary that hopefully will get published sometime soon, but point is, not a lot of AUC published can help you in your own setup. All right, so is that the end of the story? It's not. Plot twist, now the happy ending. You don't need AUC. For some things, you don't need AUC. Remember that we're only using the top 3% predictions across the population, okay? AUC is a measure that tells you that on average how you're doing in a whole population, is a mean measure, right? But if you only care about how do I do with that top 3%, and you do well, then you're fine. And so there's this measure that's called lift that comes from marketing, comes from a completely different field, that looks at the ratio between precision at the top. This is not the precision you see in machine learning. That precision in machine learning is, again, an average metric across the data set. This is a precision at the top. This is something that you see in information retrieval. This is the way you measure if Google is returning relevant results, because you only care about how these scores, the 10 results that are returned, not the billions that are not returned, okay? So it's the ratio of precision at the top with respect to the precision of if I just were to randomly ask 3% of the folks if they were sick or not that day, okay? And it turns out that the lift is actually 1.7 to 2 across the program, as this is last year pilot data. And 2x lift is huge. Like if you've been in advertisement, 2x lift is phenomenal. It means that for the same yield of people that you actually are giving the opportunity to join a study, you're bothering 50% less folks, right? Like this thing is beeping 50% less time, which is good in this world in which we live in. But even more importantly, it's important because it's perceived by the participant that this is actually relevant information for them, which turns into increased engagement. We see that engagement doubles at 6 months in the pilot that we ran last year between sending at random and sending at only when the alert says to send. And finally, a bonus point that we didn't expect is also that it increases engagement with historically underrepresented population. We don't have a hypothesis for that. If I just really have to speculate, I think it comes from scarcity. If people that have they are more disadvantaged usually have less time to think about these things, and if you bring that top of mind, it might be marginally more effective with them than it is on the general population. But hey, this is speculation. We want to test it and learn this in the future. TLDR, AUC might not be what you need. All right, so wrapping it up, 3 more slides. They're dense, but there are only 3. How much time do we have? 5 minutes, great. So what's next? For this specific program, we want to do technical improvement, obviously, because we're all geek. And one of the ones that we care about is this one here. So I don't know if you follow the hype in AI these days. Don't. If you don't start today, it could be addicting. But one of the takeaways is that there's a large interest in this large pre-trained model. So you have large data sets with no labels, only the data sets, and you are pre-training. GPT-3 works that way, just by creating what's called pretext tasks, trying to fill in the gaps between words. And your model learns the structural language, and then it becomes much better at answering questions that are actually labeled. Well, the same idea can apply to time series too. Wearable data is time series. It's another sequence kind of data. Even the same exact models work in that setting too. So we're trying to bring this transformer kind of research into the picture here. Turns out the performance is better, but also it drifts much more faster in production. So it needs to be retrained more quickly. So trade-offs there. And also we'll be trying to improve the ML ops, so how we monitor the deployment. Then there's new application. Okay, cool. Sending people to research studies is good, but you can do a lot more if you can bring top-of-mind flu or COVID to folks. You can tell them to go talk to a doctor. You can tell them to go get a pill for COVID. One of those you can only get within the first 48 hours of symptoms onset, right? That's another idea of possible follow-up with this specific program. And then I think there's a lot more that you can do just in the future if you think about this as a new paradigm. These are basically reminders on steroid. Okay? They are reminders contextualized with your physiology and your behavior and your health. Okay? They're kind of like public health 2.0. It's not diagnostic, it's not screening, it's just a new way of being a lot more relevant when you're bringing top of mind what you already have decided you should be doing. So there's a lot of other things you can apply this to. You can index this on changes in mobility, on changes in sleep, on changes in other kind of physiology to bring top of mind, decision that should be made timely in that moment. All right, so what are the learnings? 2 more slides to go, this and the next one. Context of use is what matters. Context of use is your specific application. This is a phrase that regulators use. It means, what are you using this thing for? And you should work out things from that. And based on that, the context of use, then pick your metric. AUC might not be what you're looking for. Also, there are no sacred cows. If your AUC is less than 0.7, so be it. Okay, don't be afraid. Maybe you don't get to publish, but you can still get to run a successful program. And so focus on, instead of finding the right comparables, what I'm improving on. Here we're improving on sending random messages to people, sending people messages all the time. And we are improving on that significantly, right? If you're in healthcare, you're improving against standard of care, right? You do usually superiority or non-inferiority trial. Here we're improving on bothering people less while obtaining the same yield and being more relevant at the same time. Be aware of validation theater, I call it. It's like security theater, the display of things that doesn't really help the security. Sometimes that happens for validation too. If the validation is not really validating what the introduction of the work says this thing is going to be used for, that's not really validation, right? You can't really trust it to be used or to use in your use case. And focus a lot more on validation in real time, which is also called monitoring, which brings me to my next and last point. That validation to your own use case, monitoring, is much more of an engineering endeavor than it is of a science one, okay? And I think if there's one thing we can do to improve data science, I wanted to name this one weird tip to improve health data science, those articles that always get in the way when you're reading something interesting. I went back just for the giggles to my email to say, what is the first time I've said health data science and it was 2016, so some healthy flag planting here. It was before everybody else, of course. Yeah, I called that a nascent field back then, and still it is very early on. But we've done a lot of progress in the meanwhile in including doctors, in including patients, in including privacy and ethics experts, and having good clinical practice. I feel like just a little bit more progress could be done in the direction of including an engineering mindset. Science and engineering are usually talked together, like privacy and security and effectiveness and efficiency. They're very two different ways, just like privacy, security, and effectiveness and efficiency. You know, science is about generalization, engineering is about specialization. Science is about papers, engineering is about patents, open versus closed, academic versus industry. So they're actually quite very different way of thinking about the world. I was trained in both. I had the fortune or misfortune to be trained in both, and the people I was hanging out with, very different kind of crowds, okay? So we need those two crowds to talk. So we need to, in my opinion, bring a little bit more of the engineering methods into health data science. What is the engineering methods, also known as the design methods? It's kind of like the scientific methods. Like you define a problem, you do research, you specify requirements, you pick a solution, prototype, and test. But it has some key differences. One is that you start from defining a problem, finding not a question, right? Research is question, engineering method is a problem, and then you find solutions a product instead of finding an answer. And that puts a lot more emphasis on requirement gathering. Again, what is my context of use? Why am I doing this for? And on prototyping, iteration, and robustness, and emphasis on safeness. So I think a lot of engineering method, bringing a little bit of the engineering methods, bringing more engineers in this room could help, you know, really make health data science the best it could possibly be. Thanks for inviting me. I don't know if Twitter is still cool these days. I had it up there, just, you know, maybe I'll see you on Mastodon. I don't know. Questions?
Thank you for the great presentation. It was definitely interesting to hear from like an industry perspective. I had a question for one of the next steps. You mentioned using self-supervised learning.
Yes.
I was wondering like what pre-training tasks would be applicable to digital phenotyping, given that you can't necessarily augment like digital health without this on-screen data.
That's a great question. How many folks here have a background in machine learning or know of self-supervised learning? Not, okay. The same ones that you see in NLP, in fact. So NLP, you have a lot of pre-text tasks that are about guessing the word in the middle or guessing the next word, okay? And the same thing you can do with Fitbit steps. You know, I give you Monday and Wednesday, guess Tuesday. Or I give you Monday and Tuesday, guess Wednesday. And that turns out, in fact, to work, to be a great pre-test task. And if you go to that NeurIPS workshop paper that I had up there, it's using actually that for both steps, heart rate, and sleep streams. So yeah, very close analogy between sequences in NLP and sequences in wearable data. Patrick?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Thank you for the talk. It was really quite informative. I was quite curious about the transformer-based sort of approaches that you mentioned. Is sort of the goal to kind of like construct like an end-to-end, a fully end-to-end sort of process where you are training sort of like the full like maybe like raw accelerometer data and it's like sort of unprocessed form, or is it are you still using sort of like generated features from this data? So
I think the consequence is that you will have no features, like you will have featureless models, okay? But that's a consequence, that's not why we're doing it. Why we're doing it is because when you have that large pre-trained data set, then you can adapt it to a specific task with a lot fewer label. Here, to develop a model that detects flu or COVID, we had to run a bunch of these flu and COVID studies. Over the years, we collected thousands of label meaning people telling us when they have the flu, okay? But imagine now you want to develop a new downstream task, which is detecting, you know, insomnia events, right? And you want to do that more efficiently. You want to do that with fewer labels. And so if you have a large, the promise is that if you have that large pre-trained model, then you need a lot fewer label in your adaptation task. I don't know the order here. Let's go. Yeah, let's go. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I was curious about what you said at the end about bringing this engineering mindset or developing this engineering mindset. Could you say maybe a little more about what you have in mind collaborations between scientists and engineers, collaborations between different sectors of society, like academia and industry, or even within scientific practice, to bring some of these elements just in your own thinking?
Yeah.
What exactly you would recommend there?
Thanks. I realized that was quite nebulous at the end. So how many of you had engineering training? Okay, quite a few. That's good. How many of you have seen like the engineering methods as I explain it, like the engineering design methods, like the plan, create? Okay, 3, 4, 5. Okay, maybe 10% of folks. So I'm meaning bring some of that education into this team, into this group. Maybe as a workshop that was run yesterday, like have a subsession that is about the engineering methodology of like designing, of requirement gathering, of like what does it mean for something to be safe or robust. But I also mean simply bringing more of that kind of folks in the room, right? Like a lot happens serendipitously when we're just like walking around and grabbing a coffee together. So yeah, that's still quite nebulous, but maybe effective in the long term, who knows?
One more question.
One more question, middle of the way, of the road.
Yeah, so I mean, part of the issue is that a lot of your clients and your collaborators are coming from the pharmaceutical industry,
Mm-hmm.
which is ultimately driven by a biostatistician at the end. There's always
Mm-hmm.
a hypothesis-driven test design for millions and millions of dollars. Engineers don't really work with that way. They are very happy to take answers and take the answer and redo it, reformulate it. So I guess my question to you, based on that, as an engineer who is working in pharma, is how much more could we learn from the data that's being collected in pharmaceutical studies with wearables if we allowed more freedom to look at what happens after maybe the results were succeeds or fails? Because yes, it may not meet the p-value requirement, but there still might be a lot of gold in there.
I would love an answer to the question. I think that is the question. How are we more efficient with the data we already collected? It fills me with joy seeing people that are working on reanalysis of studies by looking at is there a subset of folks that benefit, even if on average we didn't cross the significance level. I think that's a step in the right direction. But really going in I can't remember how many studies for which we've collected the raw accelerometer. That is a total engineering endeavor because it's massive data that you need to stream over clouds, and then never looked at it again. So I don't have an answer to your question, but it's the question to answer for, I would say, the next decade.
Thank you. Thank you.